Welcome back to another trade all technical analysis updates. Want to do a follow-up video from last week in regards to Bitcoin. We obviously had a really nice move to the upside here and kind of share what my thoughts are around that and how I am looking to trade it. So with that being said, let's get started. All right, so hopefully everybody had a good weekend. I had an amazing weekend. Just watched football all weekend. It was amazing. Literally, that's all I did. College football on Saturday, NFL today. Well, it's actually 1 o'clock in the morning for me now. So I want to try to make this video as quick as possible, but as thorough as possible as well, because there's actually a lot of pretty important things that are developing at the moment. So that's why I wanted to, I should have done this video a little bit earlier, to be honest, but I kind of explained to you some of the positions that I'm in, why I'm in them, and kind of like how I'm looking to trade basically this range that we have developed, right? Kind of like what I'm looking for next, and touch on this, which we've been waiting for this for. I'd have to go back and look at the videos, but I mean, it's been like several videos ago by this point. Basically looking for a retest and potential short trade coming back in to test this zone, which I actually took, to be 100% transparent, and it's still open and it is underwater. So that's kind of one of the things that I want to talk about here, kind of like what I'm looking for at the moment, when I might close my trade, and kind of talk to you about why, like kind of like my thought process around entering this trade in relationship to the other positions that I'm already in. So I think that will help explain things a little bit better, because I think it's also important to take into context like what else, like other positions that I have at the moment that's going to affect the way that I manage this trade. So hopefully that makes sense. So let's kind of dive into a little bit here. So first of all, the main position that I hold, which is been very beneficial to like continuing to hold the bias that I am, that the bias that I have, that like we're not necessarily done with downside, right? You're going to have really strong bear market rallies. It happens every bear market. You're going to have very strong bear market rallies that make you question like your loyalty to the dark side, right? Basically like get everybody bullish, and then you end up getting rugged and seeing new lows, that type of stuff. I mean, we just had a very nice rally here, very nice long rally, pretty nice pullback, you would say, down to the range low. And now obviously like we're testing some upside again. Bitcoin, for the first time in a long time, I don't know long last time I've seen this, but on the 9th, it literally just from open to close, right, not even taking the wicks into account, over 10% gain in a single day, which is very strong. If you took it basically open to wick high, 12%, like 12.3%, that is immense. That is amazing. Very powerful. So I do kind of want to talk about, again, the positions that I'm in, why I'm in them, and kind of what I'm looking for. So first of all, the position that I got into, that I'm still holding, that basically like I have no reason to close. I still have no reason to close this. I haven't take profits on them. I'm not a fool. Like I don't just, I'm not looking to round trip anything, but I do have a short from here at 42,400. So just a bit above that. And I've had that running. It's just been running, and I see absolutely no reason to close it. Obviously if we start to take out 25K, come back to the range high, look strong at that point, we're gonna be pushing higher, then I might consider closing it. But at this point, there's really no reason for me to close it. We're heavily in profit. And, again, for me, like macro wise, nothing has changed yet. So I guess that's what I want to say again. Macro, like there's going to be things that happen on lower time frames, things that are going to be happening, within the span of a few weeks to a month or two or whatever it is. But over the grand scheme of things, you look at the overall trend, this is absolutely bearish, and there's nothing really. Now, again, if we're putting in some kind of range here, and this ends up being a range for another 3, 4, 5, 6 months, something like that, then okay, like I could probably, at that point, I'd be willing to say, okay, like this is certainly looking way more bottomish than it was, right? But for me, it's still a little bit too early to tell, although this has been a very nice range. That's what I'll say. So again, first position that I still have open is a short from 42,400, a little bit above that, and I have no reason to close that. Heavily in profit. The second, so like the more current position, so I have that swing short that I basically have open, and then I have other accounts that I use for scalping. So I took a, because I believe our video, the last public video update that I did was on the 7th. So that's when I uploaded that. And then on the 8th, so the day after, I actually took a long position. And I'm currently, which is basically, it was really simple. It was just a back test of a daily pivot. And it was actually like slightly underwater for a little while. Like it hovered at that level for a bit. And if you're in VIP again, I shared that. Like what my logic was, kind of how I was looking to effectively trade that. I think it was in a I don't know if it was a stream, but I was up late with some of the VIP members. We were just hanging out and chatting. We're kind of like talking about trades that we were in, what we were looking for, and that's one that I had said. I think so. My position is $19,084, so it's based very close to the low, not the low, but on this candle, it's basically just a back test of daily pivot, and my validation for that was just coming back below this low. Because if that happened, basically again, like your 18 was the low here, 18,451. If you ended up taking that out, high probability that we're probably going to not only come back down to 17.6, something like that, but we're probably going to find new lows at that point. I just thought it was pretty high probability, especially because we had this signal, right, the bearish TK cross, which is kind of like what I want to get into. So I have those two positions currently open, and both of them are doing pretty well. But my third position here, and I kind of want to talk about two things. First of all, why did I not take this entry? So that's one. What basically, it was not this entry, because this actually would have been fine, depending how you would have traded this, of course. But when you got your bearish TK cross here, it was on the 4th, confirmed, and then we actually had a pretty nice move to the downside. So it would have been here on the 4th. Open was 19,821. So it would have been the close of that. Down to the low. I mean, it's like an 8%, right? Almost 8% move to the downside. That's substantial. So you're definitely tradable. But why did I not open a new short here? Okay, so this is important to understand. So number one, the reason why I didn't, because I already have a short from higher up, much higher up. And I thought that there was still a pretty good probability that we would be coming back up to this red box at some point, right? Or if we really started to break down, if I really wanted to, I could have chased it. But if I missed the opportunity to take a short here, that's okay with me, because I'm already so short from higher up. All that's going to do, like if we start to roll over here and continue to the downside, in my opinion, like that's beneficial for me as well, right? Like I'm okay not having to try to jump in here and add a new short. But if I told myself that if I got this opportunity to basically come back up into this red zone, which you can see here, resistance, right into key June. If I got the opportunity to reshort this again, I was going to take a shot. Now, I did take a shot because I told myself I was going to do it. So it's part of my trading plan. If I map it out and identify levels of interest, you enter the trade, you take it. It is what it is. You're going to win some trades, you're going to lose some trades. I'm going to tell you right now, the probability of this ended up a win is lower and lower than every minute that passes that I'm actually looking at this. I don't think that this is very likely that this trade is going to end up in a winner. I'm not completely bent out of shape about it because I do have a long from near the low. So it's not the end of the world if this ends up being a loss, because again, if this continues higher, I'm still going to let this trade ride and it's not that big of a deal. So I'd be like, that would obviously benefit that long. That long, just to be clear, back it up a little bit, I already hit 2 take profits on that long, just to be clear. Okay, I'm kind of like tell you what I was looking at. It's basically here. So I actually took it at 19,500. What this ended up being to me was you have a range. So again, this is very low time trade, by the way, like low time frame trading. You're literally back testing a daily pivot. Like that's like an intraday trade most of the time, right? So you have a nice range form, breaks down, and then price comes and you actually push back up, get acceptance back inside of the range. Like at this point, you'd be looking for me, like looking for higher prices, right? Looking for at least a test back up of this range high. But when you're under it, which if you look at my entry, 19,080, it's like somewhere around here. For me, taking a trade off of this level, this is just looking like, for me, I'm just looking for quick scalp essentially, because what could have happened and what is a bit more likely to have happened, in my opinion, is actually to come up here on lower time frames and actually run into resistance at 19.5, being that it's underside of the range. And you very well could have, tapped it, found resistance, and then formed another range or continued to the downside. So I wanted to make sure that I locked in some profit. We ended up pushing back up inside, actually getting a really nice strong push up through 19.6, 19.7, which I thought was pretty substantial level, to be fair. We ended up pushing right through it. My second take profit ended up being 20,500, which is basically the range high here. So again, see this, basically this range that we were playing in, broke to the downside, came back up, got obviously smashed through it. So those are the two levels that I took profit. I have not taken any more profit yet. The reason being because I knew that with pretty good probability that I was going to take a short here. So this a way, if price does manage to make its way up here, then, I have a long from here, short from here. It's all good. So now that you kind of understand, hopefully, what my mindset is coming into this third position. I have a short from up here. I have a long from, again, decent, it's a pretty good long entry. Obviously got really nice follow through. This third position, I'm okay with. Again, it's not gonna be in the world if it doesn't work out, which this doesn't look like it's gonna work out, to be 100% fair. And to be honest, we'll look at the CME chart here in just a minute. That's way more clear. I think it's very much more clear. If that even made any sense. Again, it's 1 a.m. I apologize. But I had said, price comes up, which it did, into this zone. Rejection. This isn't much of a rejection at all. Again, keep in mind, this is a freaking 12% candle from top to bottom. Okay, it's a very strong move. So that's kind of strike one, to be honest. It's not entirely what I want to see. If I'm looking to get short here, just because that's a very powerful move. And on CME, again, we'll get into it, but we actually had a nice swing failure pattern on CME. Actually did take the low, and you had a really powerful reaction off of that. So again, coming up to short here is not necessarily, it wasn't as high conviction as it was when price wasn't here. Let's just say that. It wasn't as high of a conviction short. And then what was I kind of wanting to see here? So now we obviously have the benefit. We have the benefit of seeing price obviously come up, test your Kijun once, test your Kijun twice, and then you see kind of where it closed, literally right on Kijun. And now these are all daily candles. And then now this opens, and we had a nice wick up inside a cloud. I think a lot of shorts got absolutely wrecked here. A lot of shorts that were kind of shorting on the way up. And that's kind of the thing is at the moment, we have people shorting and continuing to get squeezed out. So as long as people heavily continue short, I'm one of those people right now. This is not really what I want, the type of behavior that I want to be seeing from me to want to remain in my trade. That's kind of what I'm saying. So what I was what I was wanting to see was something like this, okay, which you see a lot, which I'll show you. This. So you get your mean reversion play. Price is far away from Kijun, right? Works its way up on this last rally, gets a nice spike up in the Kijun, mean revert, and then look at this reaction. This is a very big reaction. This is the kind of short, this is the kind of price action I was hoping to see. This is not that. If anything, this to me is showing a bit more strength, just because, again, coming up in this SR zone, pushing up into it. Yes, we spent some time around. We actually spent a fair amount of time trading around Kijun. We had that spike up, like I talked about. Just before I started the video, we were actually still, this was looking like a doji candle. Price was literally still right at Kijun. Then we ended up, we're actually pushing, on low time frames, you probably see, we're actually pushing up pretty nicely at the moment. But let's just say, again, this is not the type of, this is not what I want to see. Or if you go to our nice bullish trend that we had, right? So when things are massively bullish, look at your responses. So there's one, right? So big spike up, 11K all the way to 40K, pulls back into equilibrium. Nice move to the upside. Can't really tell, but that is a 20% bounce. Okay, it's a very nice move. What happens? Price comes back, gives you another opportunity. This doesn't happen very often, by the way. It does not happen very often. But this ends up being another equilibrium test that takes you to 58K. Massive move. Then what happens again? Price comes back down, right to your Kijun, another equilibrium test, big move, start making new all-time highs, right? Before things end up rolling over, bearish TK cross, end of the trend, trends over, and then it dies. So here, kind of the same thing, right? Came up into equilibrium, nice pushback off of it. Little wishy-washy here, got inside a cloud. You can see what happens once price broke below cloud. It was just like massive dump, right? Dump, range, dump, range, dump, and then big strong buyback, like big move. So I'm not getting the type of reaction that I want to see here. So as I'm looking to manage this trade, it's kind of very simple at this moment. Two things. Number one, you could be out of this trade already. That would be completely fair. So if you're stopped out, you're stopped out. That's fair. What I would want to see myself to look to get back into another short here is a sign of weakness. Like I'd want to see some supports get lost, which you do on lower time frames, and see some levels get lost. For me, it would probably be like just coming back into this range would be bearish, in my opinion. I don't think that if this is going to continue higher, basically continue up to the top of the range, so let's say 25K, for example, I don't think that that is very likely to happen. Now, of course, it's trading, anything can happen. I don't think it's very likely to happen if this low or if this channel high, this range high is violated. So meaning if price were to pull back from here and come back below 20,500, let's just say, I think it's very unlikely. Like, I think it's more likely at that point that you're going to roll over, is what I'm saying. So as far as like looking for a sign of weakness, that's a little far away from where we're at the moment. Probably move it up a little bit, to be honest, probably to like 20,800, something like that. Again, kind of like this range low, if that makes sense. You start to lose that. I think at that point, like I'd feel a lot more comfortable probably looking again to like see some kind of structure get broken, that type of stuff on low time frames, and look to be looking for some downside at that moment. This is a little bit of a harder trade, I'm not gonna lie. It's a little bit of a harder trade. Now, obviously this retest at the moment, to me, this is not what I want to see. Could this actually be a high and roll over and ultimately, again, be the top? Yes. I'll tell you like what I would want to see, first of all, is I'd want to see this close at Kijun, at or below Kijun by end of day. If that was to happen, I think, okay, so if that was to happen, so again, this is like, I don't think it's going to happen, but I just want to share it anyway, because in case people are watching this, if this were to close as a nice doji, so let's say that again, we close basically at Kijun or slightly below. If we open the next day or two, as long as this high isn't taken out, if the low of this candle, assuming that it's a doji again, if it closes like this, it's not what I would be looking for necessarily. But if this were to close around Kijun today and then take this low, I would feel pretty confident to say that that's probably a good high and that we're going to have a really nice pullback at that point. So if that was to be the case, my trade entry would probably be a violation of this low, of today's low, which would be yesterday, which would be yesterday's low if it was tomorrow. Does that make sense? Hopefully I'm probably confusing people. But anyway, that's kind of what I would be looking for like a trade entry possibly tomorrow, depending on how today's candle closes. I don't think it's very likely at this point, but there's 15 hours left in this day candle, a lot can happen. Okay. As far as the short trade goes, again, we talked about like if you're stopped out already, which I think would be acceptable. This is not the type of price action that you really want to see to remain in this trade. If I didn't have this long position, I probably would be out of this trade already. Just to be clear. If we take out the current high, 20,000, basically 22,400. If we take that out, I'll probably exit my trade. Probably will. Just because at that point on lower times again, there's kind of like a lot of swing player patterns happening though, so that's kind of the thing to watch for. When you have like swing fail pattern upon swing fail pattern upon swing failure pattern, like it's when you have that type of structures start to happen, it's like you want to be really careful, like still being in this trade essentially. Right now, eventually one of those is going to mark a really good high, and then you're going to probably get a nasty pullback off of that. But the problem is you don't know, like if this continues to just squeeze and squeeze and squeeze, don't really know where it's going to stop, right? And we don't really have a good backstop here now that price is inside a cloud. That's kind of my point. Here was different because you had your Kijun and cloud was a ways up, right? Now, not that being, again, depends on your trade setup, whether or not you would have used cloud as an invalidation, but you had a lot of room. Here, you don't have much room, which is both good and bad. It's good because, again, your invalidation can be a lot tighter, which is good, but it's bad in the sense of like, there's not much leeway here in terms of this, because if we start to close candles inside cloud, change of behavior at that point, like you could be looking for much higher prices. And typically cloud is really a no trade zone a lot of times. So I would not necessarily want to remain in my short if that was to happen. So hopefully that makes sense. If we remain in cloud, I think it's very likely at that point that we actually come back up to this 25K level. I think it's pretty likely. Do we make it all the way up there? I mean, there's actually quite a bit of resistance in between that, obviously, like horizontals. But I think that 25K slightly, maybe we, again, on CME, we're going to get there in a second, but somewhere around there makes a lot of sense. If it reclaims 25K and like flips that into support, then I'm looking probably 28 to 30K at that point, which is basically, if you look at top of cloud here, that gives you a pretty good, again, kind of like looking here, 28.5 to 30-ish, like kind of just looking at this structure here. That's really about where I'd be looking, which is back in this zone, right? Like back in this range, and really coming up to our macro range low that we were trading in for quite a while, like multi-year macro range low, okay? So anyway, that's jumping ahead. But at the moment, this, as far as being short, taking that short at Kijun, this is not really, it's not what you want to see. So this trade probably going to end up in an L. So anyway, I think I've spoken enough about that. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have questions, or you just pop in the comments or something. I'll try my best to answer them. Or like if nothing, if there was something that wasn't fully clear, I'm happy to explain a different video. If you're on VIP, you probably know. Like again, we speak about this stuff every day. The only thing that I didn't really cover in VIP yet, is because I'm watching football all damn day. But essentially, this push up into here, and like what my interpretation of this is, right? So we talk a lot about the entry, kind of what we'd be looking for, but kind of like what my interpretation of this is, and kind of like how I'd be looking to trade this. So again, this is not, I don't want to give this a ton of room. Like for instance, if we start pushing up to like 23K, I don't want to be short at that point. I would rather wait for a better entry, right? Line up with other technicals. If there was a reason to take a short, like that type of stuff. Like I'd rather wait for better entries and not just let my trade go against me, because this, you look at this move, it's Bitcoin, it's crypto, things happen. Like you have very powerful moves. And I wouldn't want to continue to remain short. I'd rather take my loss, call it good, and then obviously letting this long run, so that would be beneficial if that was to happen. But I just wouldn't want to be short here anymore. And I'd be looking, again, for either another technical level that makes a lot of sense to want to enter a short, or be looking for a sign of weakness for me to jump back into that position. So let's go over to CME, because I think this one's actually pretty clear. Actually turn the cloud off. This is a very well-defined range. This is why, like, this chart is actually, to me, this is very clear. We had our range low, pushed up to your range high, which is literally a perfect back test of this spike low back in May. So if you remember, as we were crashing down to the downside, CME made this wick low at 25K, bounced up, and then we were in this like month-long range, right, before we ended up rolling over. All we did was, again, made our low, 18.5, pushed up, and it was a perfect back test of this level right here. So all we did was come up to this resistance, right? So what supported price on this drop? Very strong, nice buyback, range, broke down, new low, comes back up, and now what was support is now resistance, okay? So this, for me, marks our range high. Our range low is basically here back in June. What happened, if you look on this candle, all we did was take this, we literally ran this low. So nice swing failure pattern here. Look at the reaction. So we were, again, when I was like starting the video, we were literally sitting right underneath range low, or I'm sorry, range equilibrium, which is the midpoint of this range. So it's literally the 50% mark. It's half. It's basically a range split in half, okay? Which has pretty decent, as an SR level on its own, it's pretty good. Here, look here, drop, retest, and then it takes you down to your range low, right? For me, typically when I look at this, when we're breaking back above the EQ, I'm looking for the range high. Like if I'm looking to continue to trade this range, the next logical place that I'd be looking for is really another test of range high at this point. One thing that you can do, pull your fixed range, pull your volume, see where it is at the moment, which if you look at yesterday's candle, right? So this big girthy green candle that we have here, literally right underneath the range point of control. Today opens up and you see strength, right? Bit of strength coming through your EQ. Now the value area high is a little bit higher at 22.6. But if you flip 22.6 at that point, I would be looking for 25, really. There's going to be lower time frame resistance levels. Like one of them that I see right here, you have a daily, that untapped daily SR level here. I'll probably use this little zone for me, but like you have an untapped daily. That daily is almost basically, again, kind of like the midpoint of the range EQ to range high, right? That's like right in the middle of that. It's pretty close. But like there's going to be some other lower time frame, smaller, more minor resistances along the way. But realistically, like when you look at this and you look at this as a range, then you do have some, again, kind of like interesting enough. If you look at the volume profile here, kind of like this little higher volume node here. Now it's obviously not as high as like where we just got, where basically we left, right? But you do have like a little bit of a higher volume node right around this region. So yeah, that I'd be curious, if price pushes up to 23.3, 23.5, something like that, probably a little bit of resistance there. But ultimately, if that's flipped, then you're looking for range high. So that's like one way to subdivide a range, okay? But for the time being, we're above point of control. We're above range equilibrium. This to me, when I see this, is more bullish than not. So like I'm in a short at the moment. This is to me looking a bit more bullish. It's not supporting my thesis to be short, essentially. Okay, so like that's why I'm not that short position that I am in. Speaking about the one that is, I think, what did I enter? 21,612, I think is my average entry right now. Like I am not going to give that much leeway. Okay, flip. Basically, if you start pushing above value area high, I think pretty good probability that it's going to continue higher. Which again, I probably wouldn't want to be short at that point. So that's just me. Now, obviously, if we start losing range EQ, which would play into the thesis again of like, depending on where today closes, if we end up closing like a doji candle, like over on the chart that we just left, that type of thing, then, like the analysis, it makes it a little bit easier for me. We start to take out today's low, which again, I'm talking about tomorrow. So I guess would be the low of today's candle. If that was to play out, then I think the short would be fine. Like I think I'd feel a lot better about being in it. Let's just say, not that it would be fine, but I would feel much better being in that position. So at this point, very clear definitive range. So we've talked a ton about kind of like locally where we're at as far as this range goes. So now I'm going to get into some exciting, it's probably a bit more exciting for people who are like praying for upside. But again, this range is very clear. As long as we are above EQ, as long as you're above point of control, I'm looking for high prices at this point, right? Now there's a lot of time left in this day, but if we continue to be above range equilibrium, the next natural place that I'm looking is probably another retest of 25. And then again, we SFP the low here, right? Swing follower pattern. If we came up and did the same thing here, so if we ran this high, something like this, and then, bit of a deviation, got acceptance back into this range, that to me is like a very nice short opportunity. Again, not financial advice, nothing I said in this video. By the way, I'm just like sharing my opinion. Okay, so like the positions that I'm in, that type of stuff. It's not It's not to try to like help anybody like get into a position and like listen just because I said I'm in a position. That's not it. I'm just trying to like teach you like my thought process and why I'm entering trades. Okay. But this right here, this type of scenario, if we came and basically took this high and then got back into this range, for me, this is one of the trades I love to take. This is this is just one of the trades that I really like to take. My entry and validation, whatever this high is, and then I'd be looking target one back to your basically the range EQ. Obviously, be a little bit aware of where your volume areas are, but just to keep things really simple for this, EQ one, target two, back to range low, because you're anticipating at that point that the range could just continue to be, right? Which we've seen many times, especially on lower time frames. Like you see this happen quite often. This is no different. This is on a higher time frame, but that's essentially what I would be looking for. That to me is a really nice short entry if I'm given that. So again, but you kind of need to see that criteria fall into place, right? You want to see a quick move up, or again, some kind of deviation, swing failure pattern, that type of stuff, and then acceptance back below range high, then that's your trigger to go. Now, if you don't get that, which typically I'd save this for a new video because we're 30 minutes into this video already, and it's now 1:24 in the morning. That's okay. What would happen if we don't, like if we get acceptance above this range high? So that's kind of what I would talk about next, kind of the exciting stuff. The only reason I want to talk about in this video is because I don't know exactly when I'm going to do my next one. And considering we had basically a 10-12% candle here, it's Bitcoin. Sometimes things can get really exciting. So I figured I better cover my bases now. Quite simply, you're looking back at this range high. If we flip this into support, the next target would, again, it's not, well, I mean, that's still a couple $1,000 move, but it would be to fill this gap. So basically this CME gap that we have from 20, basically, I mean, I already highlighted it. You can see it for yourself, exactly where it is. And then push back up to your likely very strong resistance, coming back into this range. Okay, again, you're 27, basically looking at this area. So like coming back into this range that we were trading in. Something like this. Okay. Now, clear that. I'd be looking for 32K, basically the high of this range, coming back into here. Clear that. At that, again, you have another gap, 34 to 35K. Clear that, looking 40K and up. That's exciting if you're, again, we're very far away from that. But I think the targets for me are pretty definitive as far as like how I'd be looking to trade that. And I'm obviously in a long from, again, like here, I'd be okay with that. Not at this point, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about, but that short that I'm in from 40 to 400, there's going to be a point where I would close that because, again, if I thought it was possible, right, see a lot of strength stepping into the market, you can probably figure out about where I would do that. But if I started to see a lot of strength in the market, I'd probably cut my trade. Just because at that point, I would probably cut the rest of it just because I would hate, like if we saw a really, really nasty squeeze to the upside, I would not want to necessarily hold on to that. You know what I'm saying? Like if I thought that there was an opportunity to get into another potentially really, really nice swing short position that I could be in for another, several months, but it's, might be at a slightly lower level, I would rather lock in what I can on that trade and then look for another entry, right? So that's kind of the targets to the upside. At this point, again, this looks pretty good. It's very early in the move. Obviously, we're literally still in this range. And the thing I'll say before, and obviously like on Twitter, people get massively bullish and already calling for like crazy prices. They did the same thing here. They did the same thing here. They did the same thing here. And then when this happened, it gets quiet for a little while. And then now that we find it again, another nice, again, to be fair, this is a very nice swing failure pattern here, which was part of the influence for me to want to take that position as well. Again, that was like a pretty nice one at that point. Did swing fail that, and the point is trade the range until it breaks. Like I'm not looking at anything above here. Like if I was to highlight this for you, I'm not looking at anything in the yellow box. I am only looking at this range. If we deviate outside of the range, then I'm aware of those levels and I'm prepared to trade those levels. But all I care about is what happens within this range until the range breaks. It's that simple. I'm sorry, I'm not one of those exciting YouTubers or exciting people that like call for 100K or like ridiculous targets. I like to trade level to level. I like to try to be realistic in the trades and actually, again, like try to make money doing it, not calling like ridiculous moonshots. And to be honest with you, here's your trend. And everybody who's been calling moon, they're eventually you'll be right. But let's actually like try to form some kind of like macro bottom first, and then let's get excited together. Okay. So anyway, my filter's not quite on right now. It's getting really late for me. Kind of like probably guess how I feel about all that. But anyway, so that's essentially what I'm looking for in BTC. Pretty simple. Hopefully it makes sense. Now, again, I gave a lot of like at the moment, like I'm still very aware of where we're at. I want to see where today closes. It's going to heavily influence kind of like what it's going to very likely heavily influence if I think we're going to continue to move to the upside, or is there a chance for my short to still play out. Again, at this point, it doesn't look very likely. Still early. Again, still, well, there's 12 and a half hours for CME, but for spot, it's 15 hours, right? So there's a ton of time left in the day. But again, like I don't feel super great about that short. It's probably not going to end up working out. So if price does roll over and we start to take out this range low, I think at that point, especially if you get a daily close, you probably don't need to wait for that. But especially if you got a daily close below this range low, I think it is like very bad. Well, again, if you're bullish, not good. And again, that's not necessarily, the trend, very nasty, but that's at this point, like that would be very bad, I would say, for bulls. And at that point, I'd probably be looking 15, 16K. So we have the, again, range trading. It's all I care about. To the targets to the upside, talk you through what I would be looking at. And I think you probably guess, again, like have a pretty fair idea of like what, again, targets I would be looking for. To the downside, same thing. Very clear. So hopefully that helps. So sorry, I'm just checking through really quick to make sure I didn't forget anything. I guess we can take a look at this really briefly. So this is Dixie. I know it's kind of at the end of the video, but we did get a very nice, I'm going to actually go to the weekly because I think the weekly speaks a little bit more. Like we're literally taking out previous week low. We came into a really big levels. I talked about this in the last video. And again, we're taking out previous week low, came up into the 786, pushed again. This is major level. Getting a pullback off of here makes a lot of sense. I was looking for 107 to 108. So again, I think I was looking at like daily time frame, but I was looking for 107, 108, essentially at least where the Tenkin is. But realistically, like this is looking like, again, probably 107 at least, maybe even a bit lower. On the weekly, it really does look like it could pull back quite a bit deeper. But to me, this changes absolutely nothing about this chart. Like it's a pullback. This is a massively bullish looking chart. There's, like to me, this is still very much bullish on high time frames. Bit of a pullback here though, probably helps Bitcoin, probably helps traditional markets, helps equities out. But at the end of the day, if I turn this off, I've already went over this, so I don't want to spend too much more time. I am looking for, the minute that we start trading back above 110, especially if we run this high and start to reclaim 110.50 basically, I'm looking not necessarily in a straight line or anything like that, but I'm eventually looking for 116 to 118. So I do think that we come back up to basically our previous highs back in 2001, 2002. So I think it's very likely. But a pullback off of this level. There have been several pullbacks along the way, and you can zoom in. These are weekly candles. They take a while, right? So again, you have your move up, pull back, move up, pull back, move up, pull back, move up. Again, having another pullback, it's happened several times before. It doesn't change anything, and we haven't broken any type of market structure or anything like that. So again, this remains very much bullish. But obviously, again, this is moving to the downside. It's going to help equities out, probably going to help Bitcoin out. And seeing that we have the opportunity to pull back even just a bit more again, that just gives, even, I would say that does help the bullish case for Bitcoin out a little bit. So anyway, that's it. 40 minutes in this video. I just felt it was really important for me to kind of walk you through the positions that I'm in, and again, kind of like how that influences my trading. If you're in VIP, you already know that. So it's like for the public, it makes it a little bit difficult for me to do updates because you don't have the full picture, if that makes sense. Like everybody in VIP has the full picture all the time. So it's like easy for us to kind of like have conversations every day and then continue to build on that and look at charts together and see how things progress and share trading ideas, that type of stuff, right? Like that's like easy to do. But as far as doing public updates and me, again, trying to get back into the swing of doing these updates, it's like there's things that change day to day, right? Obviously, price action dictates certain positions. Like you're going to change, again, if like you're invalidated on your idea, then you're going to, again, your trading plan is essentially going to change a little bit. So I thought it was really important to try to get the public, I guess, for the people that are following the channel, get caught up as far as like how my mindset is and like how I'm currently positioned. That way, hopefully, again, things make a little bit more sense. So, and the last thing, obviously saved it for the very end, but I do want to send a big thank you to everybody who is on my Patreon, by the way. And that's where the VIP tier was. I've been getting a lot of DMs about this. It's been closed to new members since May. I ended up closing the group and making it free for everybody, just as a thank you. And I was just very appreciative that we had that many people who obviously were like willing to pay to essentially interact with me day to day and kind of like help them with their trading journey in like a private setting, right? So like that was really cool. And like for me, it was just kind of my way of like, like I was just showing my appreciation, I guess you could say. But I did close it to new members just because like I was pretty happy with the small group size. I think like I closed at 100, and I think there was like like 100 members or something like that. So I felt really comfortable about like with that size, and I didn't want to have like the group dynamic change because there was I've met a lot of really awesome people in VIP, and there's a lot of traders that are certainly come a very long way since we started, and like we have some very good traders there, which is really awesome. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you to the supporters. So like I do still have a tier on Patreon. It's like $5 a month. But like the people who contribute to that, I just want to thank you. And it's like it means a lot to me that people go out of their way to give like a little thank you to to the channel, myself, for that. So again, I just wanted to say I appreciate that. And for the people that are doing that, what I have started doing, which I will continue to do this, is all of the VIP live stream replay. So we have live streams pretty often. I think I just did live stream 98. It was like 2.5 hours, by the way. So I apologize about that, but it was literally a 2.5 hour live stream. And the replays I post to the Patreon members. So the people who support the channel, again, it's just my way of saying thank you. And in those, like we typically, like we'll cover alts, we'll cover Bitcoin, we'll cover ETH, we'll cover, trade setups, that type of stuff. Like we, if any of the VIPs have questions about, Ichimoku or something like that, like I usually go into way more detail than I do in a public stream, just because like time's not an issue there, right? Like we can literally sit there for hours and hours. It's not a big deal. But again, I am sharing that information over in Patreon just because I appreciate that. So anyway, hope everybody has a good trading week. It's Monday. Let's get after it and trade safe out there. We'll see you on the next one.